We may not know who the next Jets general manager is going to be, but we now know who is going to help Woody Johnson find him. I'm Glenn Naughton with Jet Nation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. Breaking news, Adam Schefter reporting a few minutes ago that the Jets will be retaining the services of the 33rd team to assist them in finding their next general manager, with Joe Douglas having been dismissed. The 33rd team, the names you will recognize who will be a part of that process: Rick Spielman, former general manager of the Minnesota Vikings, 10 seasons with the Vikes, 30 plus years of experience as an executive throughout the league. Brother Chris, of course, was the linebacker for the Lions. If you want to get kind of an idea of Rick's approach and how he views things and looks at prospects, I cannot recommend highly enough. You've heard me talk about it before on the show. It has become my favorite draft podcast. With the First Pick, CBS Sports podcast, hosted by Ryan Wilson with Rick Spielman. And they do a great job of breaking down prospects, and Rick does his very best to keep his cool and not get too nasty toward Ryan, who, he might make the odd mistake. Maybe not the best player comps you've ever heard. I'm terrible at that too. But Rick Spielman, I actually tweeted yesterday. Just looked up the tweet 18 hours ago. I tweeted, I looked it up a second ago. I tweeted it 18 hours ago, saying Rick Spielman assisted the Washington Commanders in their search for a new general manager. Seemed to have worked out well. Why don't you bring him in as well, New York Jets? And then said at the bottom, maybe you like what you hear from Rick and you keep him on board, and he's your new general manager. Don't know if that's a possibility, if that's what Spielman's looking for. But anyway, we now have the names. Really weird that Mike Tannenbaum, who was not a good GM, is going to be helping the Jets find a GM. But sometimes it's about the connections. It's about knowing the inner workings of the league. Tannenbaum, through the 33rd team, has stayed actively engaged. And, of course, Spielman was a GM not long ago. It's only a couple years ago he was let go by the Vikings. So, again, you're talking about a guy with 30 years of experience, 10 years as a GM. I like this better than Casterly Wolf. Those guys were a little older. They hadn't been doing the job for quite some time. Ended up recommending Mike Maccagnan, who, just a wild coincidence that Maccagnan worked for Casterly. So that, maybe that was a little bit of just, a friend doing a friend a favor and getting him a job, because we all know how that turned out. So Casterly Wolf led it last time. This year, younger guys who have been a part of the league more recently than those two had. And, I don't know about how Jets fans in general are going to feel about it, but I really do think, you could have done worse if you were Woody Johnson, trying to find someone to head this thing. I've heard Spielman's thoughts on the Jets. He actually, funny enough, was he mocked a tackle to the Jets last year, or this past draft, which was funny because let's be honest, we all like a little confirmation bias. We all like when we hear people who are subject matter experts say things that we're saying and agree with us, and we're like, yeah, I'm not crazy. Rick Spielman, for almost the entire lead up to the draft, kept mocking Brock Bowers to the Jets. So I'm like, yeah, Rick knows what he's talking about. That's my guy. And then, day before the draft, he's like, nah, they got to take a tackle. I was not happy. Not happy. But he was right. He was, he's trying to think of what the Jets were thinking, and he got it right. The Jets were thinking tackle. But again, Spielman, now Tannenbaum doesn't have the resume that Spielman has. Spielman worked his way up as a personnel guy, whereas Tannenbaum was more of a cap guy working under Parcells, but Parcells liked him, took him under his wing. And then, of course, had the Jets GM job with Rex Ryan, had the Jets GM job with Eric Mangini. With Mangini, I think it's sort of universally accepted that Tannenbaum leaned almost exclusively on Mangini for the picks. Now, they relied on other people, right? I talked the other day about how Terry Bradway was the guy who called the facility from the road and was like, draft Darrelle Revis. This is our guy. We got to take this guy. He's got to be our pick. So Bradway was the one who found Revis and called the building. Tannenbaum, Mangini, whoever said take this guy, and they watched the film, and Mangini agreed, and that's who they went with. But Tannenbaum, had a heavier role in drafting when Rex was around than he did when Mangini was around. He deferred to him. Those two names have been mentioned. I did a couple short things on them with Rex and Mangini, and look, Rex is, you got to talk about Rex because he's publicly begging for the job. You got to talk about Mangini because, Rossini mentions him as a possibility. And I said, I don't know if that's out of thin air. I don't know that that's something she was hearing, because it's interesting. It was not long ago. And this is why the boards at Jet Nation are great, the message boards. You've literally got thousands of Jets fans pulling tidbits and nuggets and news clips off of sources all over the place. And just the other day, somebody posted something. Now, granted, grain of salt, because it was Mike Francesa who was the original source. But Francesa claimed that Mangini was fired by Woody because he didn't show Woody the proper level of respect. On the one hand, I think, why would Mangini tell him that? But on the other, I could see that being the case. I mean, that was one of the things I didn't like about Mangini, is that I have no problem with being business-like and hardcore. I just think with Mangini, I felt like he walked around not like he worked for Belichick, but he was Belichick. Like he sort of, I got the vibe he just had himself on this pedestal as a guy who hadn't accomplished anything. He's never been a head coach. Woody gives him a shot and he walks in like, I'm it. You've got the greatest coach in the world now. And you saw him do it in Cleveland. Went to Cleveland, first thing he did was paint murals over all their former great players. I don't see any problem with a team recognizing their former greats and having murals on the wall to honor them. Mangini shows up. He's like, cover that up. I had nothing to do with that. So Mangini, to me, but I mean, you want that, right? It's a type A, it's an alpha male type A world, that league, and you want guys who are, hyper confident and believe in themselves. So it's like, is there a line? Can you cross it? I don't know. That was the thing with Mangini. So if Francesa isn't making it up, then you've got an owner who fired a guy because he didn't respect him, but then he's going to bring him back to run the entire team, because that's what people are talking about. Make him the football czar, or whatever. Don't see that happening. Don't see Rex, especially now Tannenbaum. You think Woody Johnson's going to hire Mike Tannenbaum and keep him in the building if he walks in and says, "Hey, bring back the guy that we all work. Let's bring Rex back, Woody. Maybe me too." No, I don't see that happening. Let's see, John, how we doing? We got a comment in the chat here. I don't think we'll have a GM while Woody is active as owner. If he takes a diplomatic post, then a GM and Christopher are doing a better job. Well, listen, there's nothing stopping him if he's going. If Woody opts to go for a guy, like people said, oh, maybe Louis Riddick, maybe there are a few guys out there. I mean, like I said, I would have no problem with Rick Spielman. So if Woody were to target somebody who's not currently working for a team, you hire him now. Why wait? And then let that guy start the head coach search. Tannenbaum wasn't that, but he wasn't that good. He you can't have, he had multiple drafts where he's picking 3 guys, 4 guys. And you can't, you got to give yourself a better chance than that. And he made some good all-in moves. I like, some of the years that he traded picks. I can't remember the exact price, but he got Cromartie pretty cheap from the Chargers. At least I felt like he did at the time, based on what he gave up. I can't even remember what he gave up, but I remember thinking that is well worth what Antonio Cromartie brings. So Tannenbaum did a couple of good things, but tough to grade him because Mangini kind of took over personnel once he got here. Borgonzi, Kansas City, where is he? The KC assistant for 4 seasons. It's a possibility, but here's the problem with bringing these guys in. That's how you ended up with Mangini. I know it's a different position, but you're hiring people based on association. Oh, you work for a team that's successful. Well, it doesn't mean you're the driving force behind it. I mean, look, it's better than here's the problem. The real problem is you don't know when you hire whoever it is, whatever GM, assistant GM, whatever you hire, you have no way of truly knowing what their input was before a draft. You know what I mean? You might say, "Hey, we're bringing in GM whatever. Look at that team's draft history." Yeah. How do you know he didn't oppose all those picks? How do you know? Teams sit down and talk about this stuff. And sometimes there are voices in the room that go, "I don't like that guy. I don't think he fits our system. Bad cat, whatever." For whatever reason, when they're meeting, there are guys for and against picks. So when we sit there and go, "Oh, look at all these great picks this team had." Right, but do we know that those are the players that guy wanted? He's not the GM. He can advise. At the end of the day, the GM's making the picks. So it's all a crapshoot as it is. But even more so when we just assume, "Oh, well, this team drafted well. He must have wanted all those guys." And especially when you got a guy like Patrick Mahomes, he's gonna save you from so many bad decisions. Andy Reid, an all-time head coach, Patrick Mahomes, an all-time quarterback. Anybody can, you're not going to plug in an assistant GM and everything falls apart. You're going to win when you have those guys in place. Let's see. What makes anyone believe the Jets are an appealing opportunity under Johnson's ownership, says Rob. The roster is above average with some very nice pieces, but there's very little cohesiveness. That's been my point for a while, Rob, and that's why I don't have much faith in this thing. I'm going to talk about it objectively and fairly and not put a negative spin on it. But I don't think as I've said, I think if Woody Johnson finds someone he wants who is in demand, he's going to have to grossly, grossly overpay. That's what he did for Joe Douglas. Joe Douglas, don't forget, was a highly sought after candidate. And he said, "I'm coming into a team that has a UFL roster. You have 2 or 3 football players, so I need to find 50 more. So I'm going to need 6 years. Otherwise, I'm not coming." And 6 years for a first-time GM who was proven nothing is unheard of. And that's what Woody had to do. And maybe he'll have to do it again with the next guy. And if he does it and it works out, everybody will be happy. Let's see. John says he knows what it's like to transition to a new QB. He was there when they brought Mahomes in. Yeah, I listen. The Giants supposedly got hit the lottery because they got Brian Daboll, who developed Josh Allen up close and personal, and he was going to do the same for Daniel Jones. I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to say you're wrong, John. I'm just saying that it's so damn near impossible to know what you're getting with these guys. Because especially when you're talking about player development, like the assistant GM, like what was his role in developing Patrick Mahomes? You know what I mean? And again, I'm not saying it to be a jerk. It's just, I feel like sometimes we give these guys a lot of credit for things that we don't even know if they were involved in or that they probably weren't involved in. Now look, it's highly unlikely, damn near, it's impossible mathematically that if you bring a guy in who's been there for a team that's picked 25, 30 guys in their time, that he opposed all of them, right? I'm not saying that. But maybe you're looking at a team and saying, wow, that, look, these are their 5 or 6 best picks over the past few years. Maybe he didn't like half of them. Maybe 4 out of 6 he wasn't a fan of. But we won't know. So that's why, these guys will come in, they'll get interviewed. It's actually a good point. I wonder if that's part of the process with Spielman knowing as many people as he does inside the league. And Tannenbaum probably does too. But, well, in terms of results, John, anything's better than we recently had. I can agree with that. But drafting wise, we know it can be a lot worse. The recent history has told us it can be a lot worse. As someone said up here, and we've been saying it, we've been saying it since last year. There's talent on this team. When Joe Douglas took over, there wasn't. You had Darnold and Jamal Adams. Jamal Adams is now out of the league, and Sam Darnold needed another 3 years to be good. 4 years, however long, 4 years to be good. The GM that comes in here, and we were talking about this earlier on the forums on Jet Nation. Like, nobody's talking about Joe Tippmann right now. Everyone wanted to talk about him when his snaps were bad. But now that he's having himself for a solid year, he's been really good. So if you believe in Fashanu, which I do, well, then you've got Fashanu at left tackle. You got Simpson at left guard, who's been really good. You got Simpson at center, who's been really good. You got AVT, who's under contract. Yes, there are the health questions, but I mean, he's missed 2 games and he's back. 2-3 games and he's back. So if he plays the rest of the way and he missed a couple games, big deal. It's the NFL. Guys miss games. If he plays another 13, 14, 15 games next year and stays healthy, That's 80% of your O-line is good to go. Like when Joe Douglas arrived with what was built before him, there was nothing. There was nothing. So it can be a lot worse in terms of player person. Who was Garrett Wilson when he took over? Who was Quinnen Williams, who I know he didn't draft, but he extended when a lot of people thought he should trade him. Who's the Garrett? Who's the Will McDonald? Who's the Sauce? Who's the DJ Reed will be gone. Who's the Quincy Williams? Like that team just didn't have anything to start with. This team has a good starting point. Jermaine Johnson, when he comes back, you're going to have a couple of edge guys. You're going to have an elite interior guy in Quincy. You're going to have Quinnen, or an elite interior guy in Quinnen. Ethered says, just sign Rex. It's not happening. It's not. If Woody brings in Mike Tannenbaum to advise him to hire Rex Ryan, people are going to go crazy. Vrabel, I would have no problem with Vrabel. I think Vrabel would be good for the culture, but I think they want to go. I think they want to go offense. It's Ed the Red. I thought it said Ether Ed. Ed the Red. Well, listen, Ed, I'm not disagreeing with you. Who will take this job is the guy Woody overpays to get. That's basically what it's going to come down to. But it does raise the point, though. Just because there's a new GM doesn't mean Woody's going to stop listening to the non-football men for the football decisions. This is what's been reported by Albert Breer. Todd McShay mentioned it. It's been a thing for years. As I've said, it's years ago that someone told me that that there's a money guy and he's the one that the Johnsons consult with. Like, unless that goes away, unless the Johnsons start listening to the football people, it's not going to matter who they hire. It's just not. If it's Woody and Ira and Jaime really making the decisions, then the GM is almost a moot point. Or making the decisions when the going gets rough. Okay, we'll put the GM in place. Oh, we don't like the way things are going. We'll take over from here, guys. We'll decide, who stays on the roster and who goes, and we're gonna call the head coach and tell him who to play and who to sit. If you're gonna do that, then you're gonna have a hard time keeping a GM. Wasn't Rex terrible in Buffalo? He had 2 years. They were bad. Yeah, terrible. What's terrible? I know they were bad. John says we have 3 good O-line players, but we need 2 guys there. 1 QB in the secondary. We need to do this through the draft. Cap picture sucks right now because Rodgers. That's true. Again, AVT's a good player. He just hasn't. It's the health. It's the issue there. If you're talking, I still haven't given up on Carter Warren. I know a lot of fans gave up on him the second he was drafted. I don't know why. I think maybe he didn't have the name recognition. Fans give up on guys real quick if it's not like a top 50 player. I don't know who that is, so he must not be good. Yeah, I feel the same way, Wild Wave, 100%. Very happy Spielman's involved. Not so happy Tannenbaum's involved. And I wondered, I had this thought because the other day, for those of you who missed it, Tannenbaum was asked publicly, what was it like working for Woody? Did Woody meddle? And Tannenbaum was like, Woody was great. He was awesome. Loved it. He never did anything. But then I realized Tannenbaum's working for this organization that assists NFL teams. Of course, he's not going to come out. If he's hoping to get the call from Woody that we're going to pay you to work as consultants and hire us a GM, of course he's not going to come out publicly and say, yeah, tough place to work. Owner meddles all the time, tells you what to do. So, there may have been some ulterior motive there from Tannenbaum who wants that. He wants that check. He wants, anyone that anyone that fires a GM or a head coach, if you're running an organization that assists with that, you're not going to publicly say anything to make a job less desirable if you're going to be asked to step in and help and pick up a paycheck. That's BS from Tanny, and we know it. Yeah, like I said, it could be. Can go after Purdy. I wouldn't. Look, Purdy, nice player, don't get me wrong, but it's almost like when you've got Shanahan running that offense, that scares me. Like if you get Shanahan and Purdy, fine. Which, by 49er fans are like, fire Shanahan. Yeah, please fire Shanahan. Shanahan wouldn't come work for Woody. But yeah, Purdy, anyone who's had a few good years under an elite offensive coach, That worries me a little bit. If Purdy would come in for a reasonable dollar amount, I could get on board with it. But why would he? I mean, he's got agents, and they're going to demand 30 plus million a year. And if it turns out he's not good, or he's not anywhere near as good out of that system, then you're in big trouble. So yeah, I don't know about Purdy. What about crazy as it sounds? And I'm not saying for or against. It's just a thought, something that popped up the other day that I saw. What if it were Darnold? What if Darnold hits free agency? You think Woody wants him back or the next GM? I don't know about that. I don't know about that at all. I know somebody. There's a what is it? Former or current assistant to Howie Roseman in Philly, which would be weird because that was Joe Douglas's job. Bring in a Philly guy. Does he try to bring Becton with him? Becton played well again last night, folks. And I think, after this year and he stays healthy, I could see Becton, I could see his reps searching for tackle jobs before they give into a guard job because it's more money. You want to play tackle. So if Becton feels like he can play there and he's if he remains healthy the rest of the way and continues playing at a high level, and I'm not talking about bringing him back here. I just the name popped in my head because thinking about the GM names who are being thrown around. So right now it's Spielman and Tannenbaum to come in. We'll see. Like I said, if they gave Spielman the job, I would have no problem with that. Is it the entire 33rd team or just Spielman and Tannenbaum? I'm not sure, Wayne, to be honest. Those are the two names I saw that were in the tweet, and it came out from a couple people, but Schefter was the first one I saw it from, and Schefter said 33rd team, Tannenbaum, Spielman. And that was the extent of it. I know they have Wannstedt. God, that's no, I wouldn't. He's not good. Not good. Gruden, different story. Gruden, I like Gruden. He's a little bit wacky. His stuff he's been doing on his page I think he's become a caricature of himself. But I know he's with Barstool now. Rob says people forget Jordan Travis was a top 3 before the injury. Don't give up on him. Listen, I like him a lot. I've said many times I mocked him to the Jets. I don't think he was never top 3. He was maybe 3rd round prospect, 4th round prospect who fell a little because of the injury. Doesn't have elite arm strength, but he's got a lot of other stuff. He's got good enough arm strength. He's got good accuracy, reportedly off the charts leadership. Obviously has mobility, something the Jets haven't had in forever. Zach had a little bit, but just he struggled in so many other areas. It almost didn't matter. Me personally, here's the thing, Rob. I'm not giving up on Jordan Travis. I think he might be a good player, but you don't not get a quarterback because you've got a 4th, 5th round lottery ticket in Jordan Travis. Like, you still have to get a quarterback and let them battle it out. And especially, again, he wasn't drafted by this regime. Once you bring in a new regime, all bets are off. You don't know who's staying, who's going. That's why I said a few minutes ago, give Joe Douglas credit for keeping Quinnen Williams. Because when he arrived, there were reports of teams offering multiple firsts and multiple premium picks for Quinnen Williams. And Joe Douglas could have been like, you know what? I didn't pick him. Let's ship him off and get me, 3, 4, 5 more picks in the top 100, top 150. And he didn't. Joe Douglas said, nope, not for sale, and we're re-signing this dude. And they did. Beloved P says Aaron Glenn's gaining steam as a coveted head coach candidate. His defense, absolutely. We've mentioned Aaron Glenn many times on our show. He would be my first choice as a defensive guy. If you're going to go defense, get Aaron Glenn. If Aaron Glenn can tell you're not getting Ben Johnson, obviously, because if Ben Johnson moves on, it's going to be for a head coaching job as well. And I would imagine he's going to go somewhere where there's a stable, or at least somewhat stable, quarterback situation. Like Jacksonville. If he likes Trevor, or if he thinks he can draft a quarterback in the top 2 or 3, then maybe he does that. Living in Florida, watched him for 2 years. Chad Pennington with wheels. Yeah, which is sort of what I was saying, right? Not elite arm. I think he's got a better arm than Chad had. Much better runner, obviously, and protects the football, which Chad did. Chad's got some kids playing now. He's got a kid in high school, and he's got a kid in college, kid at Marshall. He's got one son at Marshall. And I think it was Connie Harburg tweeted out the other day. Pennington's kid In high school, 69 career touchdowns and no interceptions or one. Insane. Ben Johnson to the look. I've seen people say Ben Johnson to the Jags. I've seen people say Ben Johnson to the Saints. Um, I think I could see Aaron Glenn going to the Saints. Ben Johnson, does he like Derek Carr? Carr's been dinged up a little bit. Numbers are okay, but I don't know if they're, Carr does seem to have games and spells where he doesn't play well until the game is out of reach. But he also, that's part of the reason he's got so many comebacks. He sometimes you get guys who like turn it up a notch when the heat is on. But Carr hasn't been good enough. I mean, Carr's contract, that was a big topic on our show during the Rodgers thing. I said I would have preferred Carr because, I mean, at the time we didn't know Rodgers was going to take a pay cut. But I said Rodgers worried me because of the age and the possible injuries. And if you get Carr, you have him for 5 or 6 years. You get Rodgers, it's possibly 1. I thought 3 was a pipe dream. I thought 2 at best. And it looks like they will get 2 years, 1 on IR, in exchange for everything they gave up for Rodgers. And the Saints will still have Carr, who may get moved on. Again, hasn't been great, but a quarterback like Derek Carr is better than, at least to me, a mid-round project, or because that's the other issue in this draft is you got 2 quarterbacks at the top of the first round, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. That's it. And his father has come out and said, I will call teams behind the scenes and tell them not to draft him if they're like not a good organization. That would be the Jets. So you have to figure the Jets would be one of the teams getting a call from Prime saying we're not going to play for you. And that leaves just Cam Ward. And if anybody takes him ahead of you, that's it. Where do you go from there? Jackson Dart, Quinn Ewers in the very, very late first round trade down, or early second. Not a lot of quarterbacks go in the second round anymore. I don't know if people have realized that. But teams seem to have taken the position, if you're worth a second and you're a quarterback, then I'm going to take you late in round 1. I'm going to trade up or trade down, whatever I have to do, take you at the end of round 1 so I have that 5th-year option. If you're not good enough to go in the first round, I'm not taking you in the second round. And so you look at the last 3-4 years, number of quarterbacks taken in round 2, it's like 1 or 2 a year. Teams just, they want that 5th-year option with the quarterbacks. So if you're not worth getting in the first round, they'll wait till later. That's not to say nobody goes in the second round, but it's just, and I could be wrong. Maybe it hasn't changed a lot, but I feel like years ago you would see 4 or 5 quarterbacks go in the second round. That hasn't been the case the last few years. Let's see. Glenn gives us a legacy pick. That is a nice thing. You like it, and I mean the guy's a good coach. That's the main thing. But the legacy piece is always nice. Ben Johnson, rumored to be super picky. Well, Ben Johnson was the guy last year. There were rumors that he wanted like 14, 15 million. So I don't know about that. Gus, how we doing, Gus? Mangini boys wanted to be the smartest guy in the room. That's the thing. Mangini always came across that way. Super paranoid, which I get. He gets that from Belichick. But I talked to some folks with the Jets about him. You know what? Obviously, back when I was in the States and I was covering the team at training camp, I'd get the opportunity to speak to some folks about, not a ton of things. I never pried or got nosy, but sometimes things just came up in conversation. And, you mentioned the name Mangini, and it was a lot of like, whoa, like working for that guy, like the paranoia was off the charts. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Rich, how we doing, Rich? How about the kid from Florida State we drafted? Well, yeah, we talked about him a second ago, Rich. Jordan Travis. I like him a lot. Liked him pre-draft. Wanted the Jets to take him. Was very happy they did. But you can't delay your quarterback plans or hold off on getting a franchise guy because you have a 4th, 5th rounder who you haven't even seen yet. The odds of him being a franchise guy are a long shot, to say the least. And what's the worst thing that happens? You take a quarterback in round 1, and they're both good. And now you've got a trade chip to take a guy that you took in the mid-late rounds and move him for premium picks, or you've got a great back. Like there's a lot of things. The one thing you can't do is say we're just going to move forward and assume Jordan Travis is going to be the guy. That would be reckless. Is Belichick going to coach the Bengals? I think if Belichick comes back, I think I don't know that a lot of people want him. I guess the Bengals would make sense, but I don't know. I can't help but think he would love to be reunited with Brady. or with I never know with them. There's days where I'm like, there's some animosity there, and then there's days where I'm like, you know what? There's enough professional, respect and courtesy that they could work together. So I don't know. We'll see about that. Where was Belichick yesterday? Holy King. He was in New Orleans. I was watching a game. Was it LSU? I forget. I was watching a game, and the commentator was like, "Oh, Bill Belichick was in town this week, and there is an opening or potential job opening in the state this within the coming months." So I don't know what Belichick was doing. I think it was a college game. It must have been LSU. It was somewhere in Louisiana, and they were commenting that they knew Belichick was in the state of Louisiana for a few days, and that was the hypothesizing is would he be coming to New Orleans? Um, let's see. Rich says he only dropped because of injury. He did. He dropped, but it's not like he was going to be a first or second round guy. He was going to be a mid, third, fourth rounder, and he went a little later than that. Infrared Jets, 100% agree. I would draft Mason Graham out of Michigan, 100% agree. Unless if Cam Ward falls to the Jets, I take him. If not, give me Mason Graham. Him next to Quinnen Williams would be great. Get another lineman. In the second round, I would get one later. I would get either of the Iowa kids. Yaya Black, I think, is good, and his teammate Aaron Graves, who I think I may be a little too high on him. I looked earlier, and the scouting sites have him as like the 380th prospect. Someone had him as a 500. I don't know. I watched him and I liked him. I was like, this kid looks draftable to me. Stout at the point of attack, holds up well. Does a good job keeping his eyes in the backfield. Like I liked him. Made some tackles, some run stops against Ohio State, against some top competition. He looked good. But somebody somewhere, absolutely. I take Graham there, and then another DT later. I'll tell you what, if I take Graham in the first round, and Deion Walker is sitting there in round 2, I might have to take 2 tackles. I might do that and create one hell of a 3-man rotation there. Will Howard's. I actually thought about him the other day. Because I watched a lot of Kansas State the last couple of years where he played. He did a really good job. Now with Ohio State, he's putting up some decent numbers. I would consider him as a quarterback outside of round 1. Wild Wave, Graham, Abdul Carter, and Will Johnson, all good picks. Graham would be my top choice. But if you went with Carter or Johnson, I wouldn't lose my mind. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with DJ Reed. I figured he was a lock. He's got to be a lock to walk, just because they just don't have much cap space. Check out 94. Black is 94, and I think Graves is 95. But yeah, good players. At least in my opinion, from what I've watched. What I watched yesterday, you watched a bunch of Utah State yesterday. They got a running back, Fauzier, I forget now. Number 2, did it all. Ran with power, ran with speed, agility, a lot of spin moves, really good feet. Got outside, wasn't afraid to run between the tackles. Did a really good job. Like him a lot. I think I watched 4 of his games yesterday, and I was like, Jesus, like this guy can play. Watch him against Iowa State, because you'll also see Gianti just running all over the yard. I mean, he's obviously RB1. But then I'm watching this other kid. I'm like, Utah State's got a kid who can run too. I know you've been high on Cam Moore for the last couple of years. Will the Jets be behind? I don't think so. I think he's going to. In fact, Rick Spielman, the guy we're talking about, they did a live mock the other day, and he had the first pick, and he took Cam Ward first overall. And that's today's NFL, guys. I think if you're the best quarterback in the group, you're going first overall. And you can say Shador is better, but you got Coach Prime behind the scenes saying he's going to be calling bad teams, telling them not to take him. Then maybe he doesn't go 1 overall. And so I'm sure some teams will have Cam Ward ahead of him. So I think the Jets. Here's what's probably going to happen. Because these are the types of things that happen to the Jets. The Jets are going to come back after the bye. Aaron Rodgers is going to be a little bit healthy. We're going to see him start throwing the ball beyond 7 yards. And they'll win a few games and drop themselves in draft position. And Cam Ward will be even further. He's already with the Jets picking at what 5, 6, he's out of the discussion. But I expect the Jets to be picking 13, 14, somewhere in there. Even 10 or 11, I don't think Cam Ward's going to be an option. But if he is, absolutely, I would take him. Just don't see it happening. As you said, Peace. I've been high on him for a couple years now. Jalen Daniels. I'm gonna be watching. Okay, so I talked about him the other day during the game while they were playing Colorado, and I was saying don't sleep on this kid. It was a couple years ago. I actually found an article. Actually, it's funny that these three. So I found an old article I wrote before the start of the last college football season. And it was just sort of sitting down off the top of my head. Here's some names, players I really like. And what was it? I had Cam Ward, Jordan Travis, and Jalen Daniels were the three quarterbacks I said that I like to keep an eye on. One of them's a Jet. One of them will be a Jet if they pick high enough. And the other guy is Daniels, whose stock has slipped because he's a little bit older. He had some back injuries, missed a lot of time last year. So back injuries are going to scare teams off. But in terms of being able to run, being able to make every throw, which he absolutely can do, protecting the ball, which he absolutely does. And we've seen this week now, Kansas, this is what's going to help his stock. If you didn't see the stat, Kansas just became the first team in college football history to have a losing record, but beat 3 ranked teams in a row. 3 straight wins against ranked teams. Jalen Daniels can play. A little bit smaller. But I'm curious to see what happens to his draft stock because, in fact, I'll mention this to our good friend Chris Schubert when we're live Wednesday night. One of the very first conversations Chris and I had when he came on our show as a guest when he was still working with TDN. I kind of, after the show, I said, "Oh, are you looking at quarterbacks yet?" He said, "No, I haven't had a chance." This was early in the draft process. And I sent him a clip of Jalen Daniels. And I told him, I said, "I really like Cam Ward and Jalen Daniels. Check this kid out." And I sent him a Jalen Daniels highlight. And again, so yeah, those are the 3 guys I said to watch going into last year: Travis, Daniels, and Ward. And Daniels is the guy, like I said, because of injuries. So I'm gonna watch a bit of him today, and maybe post some highlights. Give me a follow. Actually, at JN_Glenn is the regular normal Jets Twitter handle right there, or there. At JN_Glenn, and also I have a draft account. It's only draft content at Jets Picks. No underscores, nothing like that. And that's just because I want to be able to follow prospects and what they're tweeting without clogging my Jets timeline with 1,000 prospect tweets. So I created 2 different accounts for that. So at JN_Glenn, follow me there at Jets Picks if you want to see player highlights for the upcoming draft classes. There will be some Jalen Daniels stuff on there tonight. But that's where we are, folks. Wrapping this one up. Rick Spielman, Mike Tannenbaum, 33rd team, being retained by the Jets to assist with their general manager search. Will they get it right? Will Woody get it right? Let's not be negative. Let's not consider that right now. Let's just talk about the facts. Those are the people coming in to help. And have a good one, Jets fans. Take care.